What if Order 66 was accidentally executed on Geonosis? What would happen then? Let's find out. So in this timeline, the deviation from the original timeline would occur early into the creation of the clone army, specifically during the integration of the inhibitor chips within the clones' brains. So what made this integration challenging was that these chips were not created by the Kaminoans. Instead, they were provided to them by Count Dooku, who the Kaminoans believed was a different Jedi known as Tyrannus. So this was the case both within the original timeline and in this timeline. However, in the original timeline, the integration of the inhibitor chips within the clones worked perfectly, but here, it doesn't. So initially in this timeline, the integration of chips appeared successful. The earliest batches of clones were spotted as expected during Dooku's clandestine tests, carried out in secret locations under the watchful eye of Sidious. The chips seemed to function perfectly, ready to execute all 150 contingency orders when necessary. However, a critical oversight occurred, because as the clones matured, their brains underwent natural growth and development. The neural pathways expanded and formed new connections through a process known as neuroplasticity, and the inhibitor chips, designed to remain separate and dominant, began to integrate too deeply with the clones' neural networks in this timeline. On a microscopic level, the chip's nanocircuitry started to fuse with the clones' neurons. The organic brain tissue grew around and through the chip's synthetic components, creating a hybrid network of biological and artificial synapses. This unintended melding caused the chip's programming to become fragmented and distorted. The oldest clones were the most affected. Their more developed brains had more time to assimilate with the chip circuitry, resulting in a dangerous blurring of lines between their own thoughts and the chip's commands. The once clear technical instructions became garbled, and because of this, Order 66, the most crucial command in Sidious's plan, suffered significant degradation. The specific instruction that the order must come from the Supreme Chancellor was lost in the neural static. What remained was a simplified, dangerous directive: kill Jedi officers. Nothing else. This is what happened to almost all of the oldest clones. If time were allowed to pass like this, the chip's influence would have continued to wane, with all the chip's orders disappearing entirely. However, before the orders could be completely lost, fate intervened when a battalion of the oldest clones, their minds most affected due to their age and the chip's integration, were suddenly summoned for a mission to Geonosis, their first real battle with the Jedi. Grandmaster Yoda himself arrived on Kamino to collect and lead the battalion. Despite the corrupted Order 66 lurking in their minds, the clones did not turn on Yoda upon seeing him. Several factors contributed to this restraint. Firstly, the Kaminoans' rigorous conditioning had instilled a deep respect for authority figures within the clones, and Yoda presented himself as the ultimate authority, pretty much. Secondly, the clones observed Yoda interacting amicably with the Kaminoan scientists, sending conflicting signals to their compromised neural networks. And because of all these factors, the clones' programming, or whatever remained of it, struggled to categorize Yoda as a threat, even though he was a Jedi, especially as he calmly discussed their upcoming mission with both the clones and their creators. Moreover, the Kaminoans themselves reinforced Yoda's authority, introducing him as a supreme commander and validating his orders. This external confirmation further confused the clones' corrupted chips, creating a cognitive dissonance that temporarily suppressed their kill directive. So soon enough, the clones boarded the Republic shuttles, with the lead vessel manned by the clone commander, Yoda, and a few other clones. As they ascended through Kamino's stormy atmosphere, an uneasy calm settled over the troops. Yoda still remained unharmed, his presence somewhat of a paradox to the clones' fractured programming. As the fleet entered hyperspace, Yoda went over the plans with the clone commander, who seemed completely obedient, but Yoda could sense that something was off. But he couldn't quite figure out what, because as stated multiple times in Attack of the Clones, the Jedi's vision of the future were being obstructed by the dark side. But basically, the journey from Kamino to Geonosis was tense but uneventful. The corrupted chips in the clones' minds lying dormant like hidden mines in a peaceful field. Upon reaching Geonosis, the shuttles began their descent towards the coordinates provided by Master Windu. The rust-colored planet loomed before them, its surface a maze of canyons and hive-like structures. As they approached the Petranaki Arena, where the few remaining Jedi now stood surrounded by droids, the corrupted Order 66 began to stir within the minds of the clones. And Yoda, in anticipation of the approaching confrontation with the droids, prepared to brief the clones on how saving the surviving Jedi was their top priority. However, as Yoda opened his mouth to speak, a disturbance in the Force made him pause. Through the viewports of the shuttle, the chaotic scene of the arena was in clear view. The Jedi, their lightsabers ignited, stood surrounded by battle droids. The sand was littered with fallen warriors from both sides, and the sight of so many Jedi in combat mode, basically, their weapons flashing aggressively, triggered a cascading effect in the clones' corrupted minds. Seeing the aggressive Jedi, the fractured Order 66 programming began to take hold, spreading like wildfire through the neural networks of approximately 80% of the clones. It started subtly, a touch of a finger here, a narrowing of eyes there, but almost immediately the corrupted orders consumed the clones' thoughts, overriding their training and loyalty. Yoda, his hand still raised to activate the comm, suddenly froze, his eyes widening as he sensed the growing darkness around him. The force rippled with danger, emanating not from the droids below, but from within the very shuttle Yoda stood in. The atmosphere grew thick with tension, and then suddenly, behind Yoda, the sound of safeties being disengaged on blaster rifles echoed ominously. As the tension in the shuttle reached its breaking point, Yoda's centuries of experience and attunement to the Force gave him a split-second advantage. Yoda sensed a shift in the clones' intention, a heartbeat before they could act. In that crucial moment, Yoda leapt into action. His small green form became a blur as he sprang from his position at the front of the shuttle. The air crackled with energy as his lightsaber ignited mid-leap, its emerald blade humming to life, just as the clones behind him raised their blasters. The first blaster shots went wide, sizzling past where Yoda had been standing mere milliseconds before. The Grand Master twisted in the air, his blade a whirling arc of light that deflected the follow-up volley with impossible precision. Yoda's feet had barely touched the shuttle floor when he launched a dizzying series of acrobatic maneuvers. He bounced from wall to wall, his lightsaber flashing in arcs that intercepted blaster bolts and incapacitated clones with equal efficiency. The clone commander, realizing the futility of ranged attacks in the confined space, lunged at Yoda with a vibroblade. But even this desperate close-quarters assault proved futile against the Jedi Master's preternatural speed and skill. Yoda parried the vibroblade, and in the same fluid motion, dispatched the commander with a swift, precise strike to his face. In a matter of seconds, the last clone fell, and Yoda stood amidst the fallen troopers, his lightsaber still humming softly. By this time, Yoda's shuttle and the others were directly over the Petronaki arena, and the Jedi Grand Master, pushing aside his grief, used the Force to guide his damaged vessel to land near the Jedi below, and as soon as the ship touched down, Yoda leapt out. "To the shuttle! Quickly!" Yoda shouted, his tone uncharacteristically urgent and almost aggressive. The scene around them was a pandemonium. Other clone shuttles had landed by this point, discouraging troops who were immediately engaged by the droid forces. This unexpected development created a three-way battle, with the clones, droids, and the Jedi all at odds with each other. The Jedi on the arena floor, caught off guard by Yoda's command and the clones' hostility, found themselves deflecting blaster fire from both the mechanical and human sources. But due to the droids distracting the clones, the Jedi managed to fight their way towards Yoda's landed shuttle, confusion evident on their faces. Mace Windu and Obi-Wan led the charge, their lightsabers flashing as they cleared a path. The likes of Ki-Adi, Shakti, and Anakin Skywalker followed closely behind, with Anakin staying close to Padme. But despite their best efforts, a few Jedi fell in the chaotic retreat. But most, including the key figures, managed to reach the relative safety of Yoda's shuttle. And as soon as the last of them stumbled aboard, Yoda used the Force to seal the doors and lift the ship off the ground. The shuttle ascended rapidly, its shields absorbing the barrage of fire from below. As they climbed higher, passing over descending clone shuttles, the survivors began to pepper Yoda with questions. The Grand Master remained uncharacteristically taciturn, his focus only on piloting them to safety. "Betrayed, Beaver," was all Yoda said, his voice heavy with sorrow and a deep concern. The other shuttles did not engage them, their occupants unaware of who was aboard, and not having witnessed the Jedi in an aggressive state to trigger their corrupted Order 66 programming. This allowed Yoda and the other Jedi to fly out of Geonosis unharmed. As the rust-colored orb of Geonosis fell away beneath them, Yoda and the other Jedi found themselves in the vast expanse of space. Without wasting any time, Yoda then piloted the shuttle into one of the Acclamator-class assault ships in orbit around Geonosis. These assault ships were manned by not clones, instead by Republic officers, which again made things easier for the Jedi. And immediately upon boarding, Yoda ordered the ship jump to hyperspace, back to the capital. As Yoda's shuttle disappeared into the atmosphere of Geonosis, carrying the escaped Jedi, the remaining clones on the planet's surface found themselves in a state of neural chaos. The corrupted inhibitor chips, already malfunctioning due to their improper integration, experienced a critical failure in the wake of the Jedi's sudden departure. The chips, designed to prioritize the elimination of the Jedi, suddenly lost their primary target. This abrupt shift caused a cascading effect within the clones' neural networks. The fragmented Order 66 programming, now without its intended focus, began to misfire indiscriminately. On a neurological level, the chip's nanocircuitry, which had fused with the clones' neurons over time, started sending erratic signals throughout their brains. The amygdala, responsible for processing emotions like fear and aggression, became hyperactive. Simultaneously, the prefrontal cortex, crucial for decision-making and impulse control, experienced a significant drop in activity. This neurological imbalance resulted in a severe distortion of the clones' perception. Their minds, overwhelmed by the corruption of the chip's signals, latched on to the most basic command remnant, which was now simply kill. However, without the specific Jedi target, this directive expanded to include all organic beings except themselves. Primarily organic beings because droids are not alive, hence you cannot kill them. And the reason for sparing fellow clones lay in the chip's original programming. A fail-safe mechanism designed to prevent clones from turning on each other remained partially intact. This created a bizarre scenario where the clones recognized each other as allies while viewing all other life forms as threats. As the chaos unfolded on the arena floor, Count Dooku found himself in a state of utter confusion. From his vantage point high in the Geonosian Spire, he had watched with growing bewilderment as the clones, meant to be under the Republic's control, turned on the Jedi with unbridled ferocity. This unexpected turn of events threw Dooku's carefully laid plans into disarray. Realizing that the situation was spiraling out of control, Dooku knew he had to act quickly. He turned around and walked past Jango and Boba. He then turned to Poggle the Lesser, who walked with him, equally stunned by the unfolding carnage. The plans, Dooku demanded from Poggle. We must secure them immediately. The plans being the plans to the Death Star. Poggle nodded, his insectoid features contorting with worry. He scuttled to a nearby console, his clawed hands working frantically to transfer the Death Star plans into a data disk. As the transfer completed, Dooku snatched the disk, tucking it securely into his robes. Meanwhile, the arena became a hellscape of chaos and violence. The clones, their eyes wild with an unnatural bloodlust, turned on every non-clone organic in sight. Geonosians, caught off guard by the sudden onslaught, fell in rows, their insectoid bodies crumbling under the relentless barrage of blaster fire, their wings twitching uselessly as they died. A batch of clones who were supposed to be under Ki-Adi-Mundi's control even used a flamethrower on the Geonosians. The separatist battle droids, initially programmed to fight the clones, found themselves in an unexpected position, because the clones, driven by their corrupted programming, saw the droids merely as obstacles in their path to organic targets. This led to a surreal scene where battle droids stood almost ignored, while clones fruitlessly hunted down fleeing Geonosians and other beings. And because of the clone forces ignoring the droids, their death toll rose dramatically. They charged forward with reckless abandon, ignoring their own safety in their single-minded pursuit of organic life. Droids picked off many clones, but the clones pressed on, not even registering their fallen comrades. Meanwhile, in the Geonosian Spire, Count Dooku tried to escape. But as he was fleeing on his speeder, several newly arrived clone shuttles received the garbled order to pursue Dooku. So quick side note, this did not happen in the original timeline, because in the original timeline, the Jedi were leading the clones. And the clones didn't just do whatever they wanted. And beyond that, their self-preservation instincts were fully intact in the original timeline, which is not the case here. Dooku's speeder weaved through the air, pursued closely by several clone shuttles. The Count's piloting skills were put to the test as he dodged and rolled, avoiding the relentless barrage of fire from his pursuers. But as skilled as he was, the odds were stacked heavily against him. A shot from one of the shuttles managed to clip the speeder's engine, sending it into a tailspin. Dooku, his face a mask of grim determination, leapt from the doomed vehicle. He landed gracefully on a lower platform, his lightsaber igniting with a snap hiss as his feet touched down. But the respite was brief. Clone troopers poured out of their shuttles, quickly surrounding the Sith Lord. Dooku's red blade whirled in a deadly arc, deflecting blaster bolts and cutting down the nearest attackers. For a moment, it seemed as though his legendary skill might prevail. However, the sheer number of opponents proved too much, even for a warrior of Dooku's caliber. A blaster bolt slipped past his guard, striking his shoulder. Another caught his leg. As he faltered, the clones pressed their advantage. And in a matter of seconds, Count Dooku, one of the most feared duelists in the galaxy, fell to the ground, dead. His dreams and ambitions of power dying with him. Back in the Geonosian arena and surrounding areas, the clone slaughter continued. The surviving separatist leaders, including Newt Gunray, found themselves trapped in the spire. And soon enough, clones breached their defenses with explosives, storming in with a hail of blaster fire. Gunray's cries for mercy were cut short as he and his associates were gunned down without hesitation. And it wasn't just Gunray. All other separatist leaders were quickly destroyed by the clones who cared not for their own lives, their only focus being to kill. Jango Fett and Boba also fell, unable to fend off the clones. And someone else who died was General Grievous. So quick side note, Grievous was present during the Battle of Geonosis. Supposedly, he was in the tunnels underneath the arena. In the original timeline, he managed to kill a Jedi too, by the way. But in this timeline, with the clone army completely overrunning the place, Grievous couldn't just stay hidden in the tunnels. And he came out to fight off the clones. And he actually managed to take out a few clones, but soon enough, the clones ganged up on Grievous, and he was pretty much vaporized. And so, as the organic population around them dwindled, the clones finally turned their attention fully to the droids. The battle shifted, becoming a little more conventional, but no less brutal. The clone troopers, their armor scorched and bloodied, engaged the mechanical army with a fervor that bordered on madness, and the droids soon found themselves outmatched by the clones' sheer ferocity. Tactical droids attempted to coordinate a defense, but their programming strategies were useless against the unpredictable, self-destructive attacks of the clones. Hours passed, and the sounds of battle slowly died down. The rust-colored sands of Geonosis were stained darker with blood, and littered with the broken remains of clones, Geonosians, and the scattered parts of destroyed droids. And at the end of it all, only a handful of clones remained standing amidst the carnage. And as the dust settled, a few surviving clones began to regain some semblance of rational thought. They looked around at the devastation, their eyes gradually clearing of the murderous haze that had consumed them. "What happened?" one trooper asked, his voice cracking as he surveyed the nightmarish scene around him. Another removed his helmet, revealing a face pale with shock. I remember killing, but it's all a blur. Who commanded us to do this?" he asked, confusion evident in his tone. Back on Coruscant, the Jedi and Padme Amidala finally reached safety, and during their tense journey through hyperspace, the Jedi and Yoda went over what had happened. No one had any clear answers, with Yoda telling them that he sensed a disturbance in the Force, and that something took away the clones' free will, essentially. The remainder of the journey was mostly silent, with no one having anything to say, all lost in their own thoughts. As the shuttle emerged from hyperspace and approached Coruscant, the Jedi's sense of unease grew. The capital's glittering lights provided little comfort as they landed on the temple's platform. Mace Windu, flying by Obi-Wan, Ki-Adi-Mundi, and Shakti, awaited Yoda's guidance, with Anakin having left, since he was in charge of Padme's safety. "What should we do, Master Yoda?" Mace asked, his voice filled with concern. "Speak with the Kaminoans." "We will," Yoda replied, his tone resolute. "Discover the truth, we must. A trap, I sense." And soon enough, the Jedi made their way over to the temple's communication center, their steps echoing through the silent halls. The air was thick with tension, every shadow seemingly hiding a new threat. Yoda led the way, his presence a calming force amid the turmoil. A connection to Kamino was soon made, the holoprojector flickering to life. And soon enough, Lama Su, the Prime Minister of Kamino, appeared before the Jedi. His serene expression did little to calm the Jedi's anxiety. "Master Yoda, to what do we owe the pleasure of this unexpected call?" Lama Su asked, his tone polite yet curious. "Prime Minister, grave news I bring," Yoda began, his eyes fixed on the Kaminoan. "On Geonosis, the clones turned on the Jedi. Attack us they did, without reason." Lama Su's calm demeanor faltered, his eyes widening slightly in surprise. "This is most disturbing news, Master Yoda. I assure you we were unaware of any such malfunction." "Malfunction, you say?" Yoda's voice was tinged with suspicion. "Investigate this, you must. An explanation we require." Yoda could of course sense that Lama Su was not being deceitful. Lama Su nodded, his expression earnest. "Of course, Master Yoda. We will begin an immediate investigation into the matter. I assure you the Kaminoans will find the cause of this anomaly." Yoda's eyes narrowed, sensing the Kaminoan's sincerity, and Yoda again sensed that Lama Su was speaking the truth. "Await your findings, we will, Prime Minister." Lama Su's expression then shifted to one of concern as he asked the following. "Master Yoda, do you have any clones still with you? Examining them may help us understand what went wrong." Yoda's face grew somber. "With us they are not, but the bodies of the clones we were forced to eliminate remain in the temple, they do." Yoda of course referring to the bodies of the clones he was forced to kill in the shuttle. The bodies which the Jedi had not removed before using the shuttle to escape Geonosis. "Anyways, having heard that bodies of the clones remain," Lama Su said the following. "In that case, Master Yoda, I request that the bodies be sent to Kamino for a thorough examination. That would make things much easier for our investigation." Yoda's expression hardened. "Refuse I must, Prime Minister. Trust in short supply it is. On Coruscant, examine the bodies your doctor scanned. Facilities for it available in the temple they are." A tense silence filled the room, but finally Lama Su, clearly reluctant, nodded. "Very well, Master Yoda. I will send our chief scientist to Coruscant immediately. I assure you, whatever went wrong will be rectified." Within hours, a Kaminoan medical team arrived on Coruscant, their shuttle sleek and sterile against the bustling backdrop of the city planet. They were greeted by Yoda and a small contingent of Jedi, including Mace Windu, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Anakin Skywalker, who by this point had returned. The Kaminoans, dull and serene, moved with an air of practiced efficiency, carrying specialized equipment designed for intricate biological analysis. The air seemed to hum with the collective tension of the Jedi as they escorted the Kaminoan doctors to the quarantine medbay where the clone bodies had been moved. As they reached the medbay, the Kaminoan doctors wasted no time. They began setting up their equipment, their elongated fingers moving with precise, almost mechanical grace. Yoda, Mace, Obi-Wan, and Anakin stood by, their expressions grave as they watched the Kaminoans prepare to unravel the mystery. The Kaminoan lead doctor, Dan Wee, approached the first body with a scanner, the device emitting a soft hum as it passed over the clone's form. The other doctors worked in unison, attaching various sensors and diagnostic tools to the bodies. The flickering lights of the equipment cast eerie shadows on the walls, adding to the already palpable tension. Minutes stretched into agonizing silence, broken only by the beeps and whirs of the Kaminoan devices. Yoda's ancient eyes focused as he observed the process, his mind racing with possibilities and suspicions. Mace Windu's stern gaze never left the Kaminoans, his posture radiating a readiness to spring into action at a moment's notice. As the Kaminoans continued their examinations, Tanvi turned away from the team and approached the Jedi. Her slender form moved with a grace that belied the urgency of the situation. Bobbing slightly, she addressed the gathered Jedi with a calm yet solemn tone. Masters, we need a few days at least to provide a meaningful explanation to this behavior. The abnormalities we are detecting require a thorough analysis. Yoda nodded slowly. Understand we do, Doctor. Time you have, but haste. Also important it is. Following this, Yoda turned and began walking away, and the other Jedi followed suit. But the Jedi did not leave the Kaminoans unattended, because Yoda soon contacted Master Shakti and requested her to keep an eye on the Kaminoans. And Shakti complied. And having done this, the Jedi left the medbay, their minds heavy with the weight of uncertainty. Meanwhile, the Republic had officially sought an explanation from the Geonosians regarding the events on Geonosis. The initial reluctance of the Geonosian leadership, or what remained of it, soon gave way to fear. Specifically, fear of the Republic sending more clones to Geonosis, because the Geonosians, of course, did not know that the clones malfunctioned. They believed that this is how they were meant to act. And so the Geonosians complied with the Republic's request for a report on what happened. From a vast, dimly lit hall of a Geonosian command center, the new military leader of the planet stood before a communication console. His insectoid features were tense as he prepared to relay the report. A protocol droid stood beside him, its photoreceptors glowing softly, ready to translate Geonosian into Galactic Basic. The atmosphere was one of unease, flickering holographic lights, casting eerie shadows on the walls of the Geonosian hive. The Republic's envoy, a stern-faced woman, appeared on the screen. The protocol droid began translating as the Geonosian leader went over his report. It has the first significant losses, the Geonosian clicked, which the droid translated into Basic. All the leaders of the Separatist Alliance are now dead, including Count Dooku Sereno. The Republic Army, in their frenzy, destroyed all the droids and the droid factory with explosives. They showed no regards for their own lives. They acted like madmen, the protocol droid translated. The report went over more details, eventually ending with the protocol droid translating the following. At the end of the battle, a few clones remained in the arena. Their numbers greatly diminished. Our forces, using long-range weapons, were able to eliminate the last of them. The report finished. The Republic official, her expression unreadable, processed all of this, following which she thanked the Geonosians for their compliance and ended the transmission. This report was then shared with the Jedi Council, and so in the temple, Yoda and the Council reviewed the Geonosian report. Dead, Dooku is, Yoda murmured, his voice a mix of sorrow and contemplation. A victory, it seems. War has been averted with the death of Dooku and the Separatists. Having heard this, Mace Windu said the following. I doubt this was the true intention behind the clone's betrayal. His voice was edged with suspicion. Yoda rubbed his head. Unsure of the mystery I am, he admitted, his eyes narrowing in thought. Seeing Yoda's uncertainty, Obi-Wan folded his arms and remarked, The Kaminoans should soon offer an explanation, Master, hopefully shedding some light on this enigma. Yoda nodded slowly, deep in contemplation. If this Sith Sidious, who Dooku spoke of, is somehow behind this, his voice trailed off, leaving the question hanging in the air. The Jedi Council remained silent, the gravity of the situation settling heavily upon them. Mace Windu then turned to gaze at the Coruscant skyline through the council windows, his brow furrowed. I sense there is more to this, he said quietly, a deep unease resonating in his words. Days later, in the medbay of the Jedi Temple, Tanvi and the Jedi gathered to discuss her findings. The room was bathed in a cold, clinical light, casting stark shadows that added to the atmosphere of tension and anticipation. "We have examined the bodies thoroughly," Tanvi began, her voice calm but tinged with a trace of concern. "We discovered that the inhibitor chips within the clones had been damaged." Obi-Wan, standing with his hands folded, looked at Tanvi with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. "Inhibitor chips? No mention of these chips were made to me while I was on Camino," he stated firmly, his eyes locking onto the Caminoan. Tanvi nodded, her expression serious. "These chips were provided by a Jedi named Tyrannus to us. He oversaw the clone project after Master Sifo-Dyas ceased communications with us." She paused, letting the words sink in. "Master Tyrannus supplied us with these chips and instructed us to have them embedded into the brains of every single clone we created. Tyrannus told us that these chips were there to increase obedience within the clones, and also to allow them to go against rogue Jedi if need be." Tanvi continued, "Without the chips, clone loyalty, which is deeply ingrained, would prevent the clone troopers from acting against rogue Jedi commanders. This was Master Tyrannus' reasoning behind the utilization of the chips, and we complied with his request." Hearing this, a look of confusion took over Yoda's features. "No Jedi named Tyrannus there is," she said slowly. "Why was this Jedi's involvement not revealed earlier?" Yoda asked. Tanvi's gaze did not waver. "Well, Master Yoda, Tyrannus asked us not to reveal his involvement. He also asked us to not divulge the details of the chips, to avoid the risk of possible rogue Jedi discovering their existence." Yoda sensed no deception within the Kaminoan, and saw that whatever deception the Jedi had fallen victim to, the Kaminoans had also fallen victim to the same trap. He turned to face Mace Windu, who was visibly concerned. "I believe it would be best, Doctor, if these chips were removed from the brains of every clone, all of them. If what you say is true, these chips are a danger to all of us," Mace Windu finished. Tanvi nodded, her demeanor serious and cooperative. "Of course, Master Jedi. We will immediately begin the procedure." Following this, Tanvi went on to give the Jedi a detailed report on what she had found about how the brain tissue and the inhibitor chips had intermingled. But none of that changed anything, and soon enough, the Kaminoans began the procedure to remove the inhibitor chips from all their clones. So what would happen after this? Well, with the inhibitor chips gone, the clone troopers were no longer a danger, but the Jedi would still maintain a deep distrust of them, and they would also require the Kaminoans to provide recorded holograms of their transmissions with this Tyrannus. And of course, as seen in the Clone Wars, whenever Dooku communicated with the Kaminoans, he did nothing to alter his appearance or voice. And because of this, the Jedi would soon figure that Tyrannus was Dooku, and that somehow Dooku's own plans had turned against him. But they would still be left wondering who this Sidious was, if he was even real or if Dooku was somehow lying to manipulate the Order. And because of that, their investigations would continue, but Sidious would remain elusive. As for the Clone Wars, it would not happen. Grievous was dead, the droid factory on Geonosis was destroyed, and beyond that, during the Jedi's investigations, out of fear, the Geonosians would give up the locations of all the other droid factories, so the droid army was never even created in this timeline. And since there was no war, production on new clones would also cease, but the clone army would be kept on Kamino as a backup, because they couldn't just dispose of them. As for Anakin and Padme, well, like in the original timeline, they would still go to Naboo and get married there. But in this timeline, there would be no Clone Wars to meddle in their relationship. As for the Jedi Order as a whole, well, all the events would make them a lot more vigilant, and many of the Council, including Mace Windu and also Master Yoda, would start to believe that there was something they couldn't see, and that the war was only averted due to Dooku's oversight with the chips. But as for Palpatine, suffice to say he was very angry because all his plans had been destroyed. Had the Clone Wars began, the Jedi's destruction would have been assured. But now, with everything that happened, Darth Sidious was back to square one. All his plans, all the money he put into it, all his manipulation, all his associates were all gone, destroyed. With everyone dead, he had no one left to manipulate. And beyond that, with the Clone Wars ending before it even began, Palpatine was required to give up the emergency powers only a few days after he received them. But still, Palpatine managed to perfectly play the part of a noble leader, and no one suspected that he was in any way behind anything that happened. Not the Republic, not the Senate, not the Jedi, not Anakin. And as time went by, his term expired, and Palpatine was no longer the Chancellor. But Palpatine was not going to give up. After his term had expired, Palpatine continued his work in the Senate as a senator. But at the same time, back on his home planet of Naboo, Palpatine began delving into Darth Plagueis' research into reversing one's age and achieving immortality, because in the end Palpatine would figure that, with enough time, he can again try to take over the galaxy. He figured that, until he gives up, he was not defeated. And as for what would happen after that, well, what if the Clone Wars never happened? Let me know your ideas in the comments below, and thank you to CJ Russell, Lord Newt, Rufus Nelson IV, Rashid, Aaron, Z Quixie1, and Michael Sampson for supporting me on Patreon and through channel memberships. And if you too want to support the channel for $1 or more a month, check out the link to my Patreon. It should be in the description. And yeah, goodbye.